Insiders, a podcast from ASI's Counselor Magazine. In this weekly series, we tackle the topics that matter most to the promotional products industry, from hard-hitting news to fun trends. I'm Sarah Lavandusky with Advantages Magazine, and today I'm joined by Jamie Crump of the Richwell Group and Karuba Sankar of RBC Royal Bank, who are here to discuss supplier diversity. With end buyers in virtually all industries implementing supplier diversity procurement programs for goods and services, including promotional products, what do distributors need to know? That's our topic. So we have two guests today. We have Jamie Crump. She's the president of the Richwell Group, a Georgia-based consulting firm for strategic sourcing and supplier diversity. She has experience in these areas of expertise in a variety of sectors, including banking, IT, pharmaceuticals, and telecommunications. And she's the author of Backstage Pass, Pulling the Curtain Back on the Business of Supplier Diversity. And she's an advisory board member for Diversity Professional Magazine, ProcureCon, and Spend Matters. We also have with us Karuba Sankar. Karuba is the global leader of corporate social responsibility at RBC Global Procurement with RBC Royal Bank in Canada. He leads strategic development for and execution of the CSR program for global procurement, which includes global supplier diversity, responsible procurement, and community activities. Previously, he was the director of RBC Global Procurement for IT Professional Services, supporting technology and operations across all business units of RBC. So welcome, Jamie and Karuba. Thanks for being with us today.
Thank you.
Thank you. Great to be here.
Thank you. So now let's start with defining some terms. What is supplier diversity, and how do you contribute to this field of business practice in your professional roles? So Jamie, why don't we start with you?
Well, I think the definition is to provide opportunities to diverse and or disadvantaged businesses. And I'll bring them into company supply chains to provide diversity and innovation for them. How my company contributes is between our consultancy in supply chain and supplier diversity. We're trying to link those two areas who work so closely together to generate the best results for companies.
Mm-hmm. Wonderful. And Karuba, how, in your words, what is supplier diversity and how do you contribute to it in your position?
Yeah, I think from from our perspective, I look at it as supplier diversity. It's not only doing the right thing and being a responsible corporate citizen. We believe supplier diversity helps drive the business value and include diverse suppliers in the sourcing process. And doing such things allows diverse suppliers to gain competitive access to procurement opportunities, and it also creates greater innovation and culturally diverse business interaction, which in turn positions us to RBC to meet the requirement of our diverse client base. Right? It's a way we look at it, how to include diverse suppliers, and also to create opportunity and advance our opportunities and equality for businesses owned by women, businesses owned by indigenous people, minorities, LGBT, people with disabilities, and veterans.
Mm-hmm. Great. So, and why is it now, Karuba, if you could continue with that, why is it important to your respective organization at RBC, and why is this something that you're going to be concentrating on for the years to come?
Yeah, I think if you look at from organizations, I look at from our organization, we are a purpose-driven organization. Our purpose is helping clients thrive and community to be prosper. And one of our core values, is diversity and inclusion. And looking at these two views, one at the values, one at the purpose, what we are looking to do is transform that into our supply chain by building an inclusive supply chain so that we could able to advance the equality opportunity for diverse suppliers, but at the same time, help the community to be prosper. So we truly believe that, doing the supply diversity helps our community be prosper as well.
Great. And Jamie, I know you're in a consulting role now. So obviously this is very important to you too. What would you say about, again, the importance of supplier diversity, especially now and in the years coming?
Well, I think, we call it the missing business strategy. that there's a benefit for both sides. There's a lot of research out there now that supports the efforts that if your company has diversity within its own organization and within its supply chain, it's going to be more profitable. It's going to have a higher sales rate. It's going to be more innovative. It's going to attract and retain better talent. So there are a lot of good business reasons, in addition to the reasons that Karuba mentioned, which are also very important. It's good business. And so as we work with companies, whether it's working with the supply chain side or the supplier diversity side, whether it's the corporate or the diverse owned business, we're seeking to bring those people together and then track and monitor and give the best benefit to both sides, so that they're gaining the expertise that they need and the results that they get from that.
Okay, wonderful. Now, what are some of the biggest challenges in this field that you encounter regularly? Jamie, why don't we start with you? What are some challenges that you have to face pretty consistently in your line of business?
Well, I think, it's one of the big challenges, I think, is that you get part of the company that's on board, but not all of it. If it's not sold and communicated well internally, then there's going to, you're going to leave money on the table and you're going to leave opportunity on the table. So I think one of the biggest challenges is getting away from this conception that supply chain and supplier diversity can work together and make this work. You really need to be working with those internal clients. Yes, we all talk about, yes, you have to have support from the C-suite, but you also have to make sure the C-suite's holding you accountable, because that's what people pay attention to. And I think that also ensuring that goals are aligned. I see a big challenge with, and coming from supply chain, we were taught that less is more. You reduce that supplier base, that brings you a bigger pie that you can go out and negotiate with. So that's what they're being paid on. Then you have the supplier diversity people. Well, we're going to pay you based on the fact that we want you to bring in more companies who are diverse. So they're almost butting heads from the get-go if you don't align those goals and objectives. And very often that's a challenge that I see that's missing. And then I think, the other thing is that companies start this, and then after a few years, it kind of plateaus and nothing's really happening. People get complacent in the numbers that they're reporting, and it becomes more about the numbers game than really are we looking at all of the opportunities that are out there. So just like you do in supply chain or marketing or any other organization within the business, every so often you're kind of going back and revamping that plan. How are we doing? What's new? What can we be doing? And keeping that momentum going is something that needs to be driven, again, throughout the organization. A really fiery, excellent supplier diversity person can't make it happen all by themselves.
Right, that's a great point. Well said. And Karuba, for you, what are some of the biggest challenges you've had to face in your time in supplier diversity?
I think when we look at it from our procurement side, we spend over $8 billion with suppliers, okay? And we segment by various categories. The constant challenge I see is in some of the categories we cannot find diverse suppliers, especially coming from the financial industry side. You take some categories, you were able to see too many, and some categories you cannot find anyone. Correct. So you have that challenge. When we push, from the top level across organization to support, and then when you go and look at it, our procurement side, then you have over 150 team members. Some of them are dedicatedly focusing on that their category, and then you cannot able to find diverse suppliers for them, right? So that's a kind of a constant challenge we see. But at the same time, I'm going to look at from the supplier side. Suppliers say that, hey, they cannot get the contracts from us, because they cannot find the right fit as well. So this is a constant challenge we see between both the parties. How do we match them and map them together as well? And other areas of bigger challenge I have is when I look at my global program, I have to work in countries where supply diversity is not matured, right? So even if you look at from, I also support US, Canada, and UK, and other markets too. But we launched our program in Canada first before we launched in US. So we have gone through a kind of a maturity of markets are different. When you look at US, is a little bit more familiar about supply diversity in the marketplace compared to Canada. But then you look at UK, which, when I compare between Canada and UK, Canada is a little bit mature than UK. So you are dealing with, countries where the program is not matured, as well as the government support is different. So you have to go through those challenges as well, defining the program in those markets. How are you going to, launch those programs, and how are you going to support that program in that geography as well?
Interesting. Yeah. And actually, Karuba, to go along those same lines here, for the lay person, I guess, in these different countries, why is supplier diversity still kind of unfamiliar territory for a lot of people? And why do misconceptions still exist or abound? I mean, I know one of them is that, supplier diversity is just a fancy word for affirmative action, right? It's kind of a simplistic, reductive way to look at supplier diversity, and people don't really know what it is. But why is there still unfamiliarity with it? Why do these misconceptions still exist, do you think?
I think, in my opinion, it is, again, coming back to the same, what I mentioned earlier is about how does the government in those region has been, supporting, and then what is the law has been done, to support diverse groups as well. Each and every market is going to be different. Okay, so what you call minority in one market, you cannot call the same minority in other markets, right? So it's defined and variations are there. Then you have to, look at it. How does that market works, and how does the program is going to be, built in that region? How and whom you're going to support in that region, correct? So that's the first thing, is you have to look at it as a supplier diversity. You cannot take as one definition and apply it to all countries. You have to look at it country by country. Who is the one requires help and support on boosting the local economy in that country, and which is a segment it needs more support. That's how we need to look at it. It's true, yeah, because sometimes when you talk about supply diversity in one region, people are very familiar. In other region, they don't understand at all, and even it's difficult to explain to them as well, because their part of the world is looks at it in a different way.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Interesting. Yeah. A different face of it, kind of by region. Yeah, for sure. And Jamie, along these same lines too, it might be unfamiliar territory for some people, maybe like Ruba said, more familiar for others. But there's a lot of misconceptions about it. People don't understand what it means. There's a very reductionist attitude towards it. And it's lovely that there are areas where it's really, thriving. People are familiar, but then there's others that still remain where there remains a lot of work to be done, right? So why is that? Why is there kind of this, the different faces is one thing, by region and culture, but then why are these still like these kind of holes that need to be filled by professionals in this space to explain what this is actually all about and the benefits of it?
Well, I think, in addition to the points that Karuba made, people also look at it, especially if they're looking at the U.S. They think, well, there's laws in the U.S. and that's what does it. And certainly that's what started it in the United States. That is a very small percentage of what's going on in the U.S. these days. But it definitely got its start by the government coming in and saying, look, you have to do this. And there's still aspects of the government that have those, we call them set-asides. So a percentage that is mandated versus what most corporations are doing, which is, here's our goals. And, we're going to do in the end what's right for the business. And then we're going to try and marry that with these goals that we've made and show all the efforts that we've made to do that. So I think that when you're looking at it from another country, particularly countries that are doing business in areas like the US and Canada, they come in and say, well, we don't have that. Well, you're doing business here, so you kind of do now. Uh, so those are kind of the discussions that take place. And I think that coming at it from the business perspective, I've seen helps that because I'm not necessarily trying to change hearts and minds. I'm sitting here having a business discussion with you, just like I am when we discuss cost or implementation or software licensing or whatever it is. That look, this is here we show this helps us make money. Why are you against that? Why don't you want to be part of that, or why do you want to detract from that? But I think too, you mentioned like affirmative action. I One thing is, I think it works better than affirmative action, thankfully. But people tend to combine that, I think, into one thought area that, oh, this is just another program or this is just another initiative versus, we're trying to build economic stability in these areas. And that's going to benefit everybody. And it's going to benefit the economy as a whole. But it's also going to benefit our businesses as we go about this. So I think that some of those misconceptions are what starts it, what drives it. I know I was in corporate until 2017. So, from that perspective, I was looking at it as we need to bring these people in because we need to be more competitive. I was in a business where there were my competition was basically selling the same thing I was selling. So you differentiate yourself by service, by the things that you do, by being competitive, by all of these different means. And so this became one of those. It makes us more competitive. It makes us more innovative. It gives us companies that can do more, that can make decisions quicker, all of these things that are going to contribute to that bottom line.
Mhm.
That I think is probably an easier decision than sitting down with somebody from a foreign country who doesn't necessarily have experience with us and saying, well, here's why you ought to believe in this. That can be a difficult discussion to have, especially when you're trying to negotiate business at the same time.
Sure. My next question for you, and we'll start with Jamie, is suppliers and distributors in our industry for promo products, they too are part of the supplier diversity and procurement. So when it comes to being a distributor that's going to provide promotional products for a company that has a supplier diversity program in place, they're going to have to bring certain companies to the table to be competitive. So when a distributor, let's stick with that, when a distributor is looking to be competitive and be able to serve a company that has a supplier diversity program in place, what do they need to know about that process, and what are end buyers looking for when it comes to a distributor and the procurement process through a distributor for promotional products and merchandise?
Well, promotion is an interesting area, which I've had a lot of experience with. And you typically, as a large company, at least my company, you ended up doing business with a larger company. It was not diverse. And at that time, there were not a lot of companies who could bring the technology forward that we wanted, the e-store and, the selection and all of that kind of thing. But that aside, we did a lot of work with that company and making sure that we were bringing in plenty of opportunities for companies and not just passively looking at what they brought to the table. But, if I was out at an event or someplace and I met somebody and I thought, wow, they're pretty much on the ball, I understood they had to go through that company's vetting process, but I had no problem going, hey, you need to take a look at this one over here. And then follow up, and say, well, why is that? I think the other thing that made the biggest impact in our program was because we had sold it internally. I had a very strong partnership with the sales organization. They happen to be the ones who buy the most promo items in a given company. And so one of the things we did was we went out on the e-store and we started to identify on the e-store all of the items that were brought in by a diverse owned company. And the first month that we did that, now these salespeople, they knew that they needed this because we were doing tier 2 reporting to their national accounts. We were helping them with RFP responses where they were being asked about supplier diversity. So they had a stake in it. And the first month that we did that, our spend with promo overall stayed the same, but our spend with diverse owned companies went up over 35%. And it stayed there because if they were making an informed choice, they were looking at it and saying, okay, there's no difference between this one and this one. I want to support this because I've got to go answer to my customer next quarter on where our diversity spend is. And they liked being able to go in and say, hey, here, and oh, by the way, we got this from such and such company. So I think there's a lot of creative ways that you can bring those opportunities together. And then again, by including all those different aspects of the company in it, then everybody has some stake in it, and so they can move through it as well.
Well said. And Karuba, as an active end buyer, in the financial space, what are you looking for when it comes to a distributor who is competing for your business and you're going through the procurement process with them? How can they be more competitive in terms of serving a company like yours?
Yeah, I think some of the Jamie mentioned it, especially when you look at from the promo industry or other categories. One of the key thing we look at it is on alignment with our values, right? So we want to make sure, the suppliers whom we look for, they are able to, align to our values. If, for example, when we look at it, say, if we focus on diversity, if we focus on environmental, if we focus on climate control, we want to have the partner and supplier to align with the same values and able to do the same thing what we are trying to do. So that's a very principled thing, right? So when you look at it from that perspective, the alignment has to be there. Now, similarly, you take into a supplier who are a distributor, when they work with their suppliers, if they are able to look at the same way, then it's a kind of a chain passes on, correct? So the value gets spread across, and then the impact gets delivered to the community, right? So if everyone started to look at that piece, and it will be very effectively delivered to the community as well. And the second thing is, how do you, look at it from a diverse company and non-diverse company? For example, in some areas, we don't go and look for suppliers every year. Probably we might have a contract for a long term, right? So when we have for a 3-year contract, then if we have selected a non-diverse company to handle the spend, then we look at it in a way, how do we influence them to create more opportunity for the diverse companies through the supply chain? So that's how we look at it on building an inclusive supply chain. And so that the diverse suppliers, can get some opportunity through the non-diverse companies as well. And then, also we wanted to recognize those companies who are able to, demonstrate and provide the opportunity to the diverse suppliers in the community. So you kind of look at it from one side as like, supplier management, when they review their suppliers, hey, look at all this value perspective as well. Who is delivering it? They all go through the standard SLAs and other things, but it's also good to see, which other companies are, demonstrating more than and beyond to align to our values, right? So then you kind of appreciate them and recognize them. So that's an important piece as well, so that your supply chain is constantly able to get motivated and able to do that. And the third thing is about going and helping not only necessarily your direct suppliers, even if it's a diverse supplier through your tier one, help them and coach them and offer mentorship to those companies, right? So when you look at our supply chain, we always should look at it, all the pieces of the supply chain, not just only the front piece, right? So we kind of look at it, say, hey, even though they are not our direct suppliers, but they are coming through our supply chain, but offer them some help to them, provide some coaching to them, bring in some expertise to deliver to them, even if it is something other than, like, for example, we are a financial company. If we want to offer some financial advices to them, hey, go and offer it as a free service to them, so that they can grow the business. It's at the end, we have to look at it like, how do you create positive impact to these companies so that they could create more job opportunity in the marketplace, so that they could hire more diverse individuals in their company, correct? By creating some positive impacts.
That's a great point. I love that mentorship element. Um, that's wonderful. So looking ahead, obviously, there's been a lot of discourse recently, since late May into the summer, about anti-discrimination and equality, justice, amplifying minority voices. What are your predictions for supplier diversity in the coming months into next year? And do you think that current discourse will perhaps help people become more aware of what supplier diversity's mission really is? Kruba, why don't we start with you?
Yeah, sure, definitely. Yes, definitely. Yes, it's going to create more awareness. And, I have seen during past several weeks, many of industry or even internally, there are many discussions happening. Our senior leaders have been reflecting on the various issues, what widespread systemic racism, intolerance, and discriminations in our society. It is going to bring more awareness. It is going to bring in more higher goal setting for organizations. Leadership is going to step up to demonstrate more. uh, there are more eyes are going to watch on many people, so people will try to perform better on these areas. um, Same thing with the shareholders. Shareholders want to look at it from companies as well. So there are a lot more growth opportunities going to happen, and that's my view. And it's also going to help us, at this specific stages, where when you look at it, how do you take the program to the next level? These kind of things will help us. There are multiple discussions are happening under the supply diversity. There are more ideas are coming up from the business side to see how they can help. There's an interconnection between clientele side and the supplier side is going to enhance much better. You're looking at from the banking perspective, more financial benefits are segmented towards the diverse groups of business owners, and that's going to increase. So there are a lot more good things are happening, and hopefully we convert that into a real positive impact to the communities, and helping them to grow internally. We are even setting ourselves higher numbers on leadership level, as well as the employee base. Numbers are increased by internally ourselves. The leaders have set higher targets now. So it's not only supply diversity, it's also create other benefits as well. We're also looking at how do we able to build the future as well. How do we create more opportunity for youth, especially the diverse youth, correct? So how do we make sure one side is creating job opportunities for them, second is on creating entrepreneurship and making them to be successful as well. So those are also kind of the view beyond supply diversity.
Great, wonderful. I love that. And Jamie, I probably among your clients are seeing something very similar these past few months, and going into next year, into 2021. Are you seeing similar trends to what Karuba is talking about?
I'm very optimistic. I mean, I grew up in the 60s, and what's happening here in the United States is a lot like what was happening here in the 60s. And it's having some of the same pivot points. I mean, a lot of what happened in the 60s was because you had TV for the first time, going into the Selmas and the Birminghams, and showing what was happening, and people were just outraged by it. The big difference you have today is social media. So, whereas in the past, companies may want to stay at arm's length, we're not going to get involved, we're not really political, let's just, keep our head down and do our business. That's not acceptable anymore. And it's not acceptable to the people now that we have in leadership positions. It's very much not acceptable to the youth that Garuba spoke of. They're just aghast that we're even still having these conversations. So even though there's a lot of things that are happening, it has kind of created this perfect storm of people who are just saying enough, we need to move this forward. So, when the pandemic hit, things were very, very quiet for me, for supply chain, for supplier diversity. People were calling and saying, my budget's getting hit because I'm being told I'm not essential, and things of that nature. How do I combat that? Now I'm seeing the highest number of companies who have never done this before are now looking at, okay, we need to get in here. We need to get started. How do we do this? I'm probably as busy right now as I've ever been, because you have a lot of and most of it are companies who have not been in the space prior to. So that for me is a real cause for optimism that, the more new companies you bring in, the more new people there are for those diverse owned businesses to meet, the more new business there is to be done. It's not the same cast of characters where, last year this WBE got it and this year the MBE is going to get that business. You're actually increasing the size of the pie to a greater degree. And I think that is a cause for optimism. So I want to see it carry on into next year. And hopefully, we've had a lot of people across the globe that are looking at this now. It's not just, North America. So they too are stepping in and saying, well, how can we help and what can we do? And I think only good is going to come from that.
Well said. Well, thank you, Jamie Garuba, for joining us for this important discussion. And for more information on supplier diversity for the promotional products industry, please visit asicentral.com/news. Thanks for listening.